explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the powerful and, let's be honest, often controversial arguments from Peter Singer's landmark book, Animal Liberation. So, let's just jump right in. The book kicks off with this simple, almost funny story. Singer's at a party, and a woman goes on and on about how much she loves animals. Then, right in the middle of it, she grabs a ham sandwich without even blinking, and that one little moment, it perfectly captures this huge contradiction that Singer says is at the very heart of how we treat animals. So this story isn't just a random anecdote. It's the launching pad for a major philosophical challenge. He's asking us to stop and not just think about our feelings for animals, but to really logically examine why we treat them the way we do. And he starts this whole thing off by creating a pretty provocative new term. And that term is speciesism. He defines it exactly like you see it here, a prejudice, a bias that automatically favors the interests of humans over the interests of any other species. His whole argument is that this is a way of thinking we need to take just as seriously as we've taken other forms of discrimination.
And this is where he makes a really bold move. He draws a direct line, an analogy, to racism. Now, he's not saying they are the exact same thing, but he argues they run on the same broken logic. This idea that it's okay to give your own group's interests more weight just because, well, it's your group.
To build this case, he leans on a really fundamental principle of equality, one that was so powerfully stated by the feminist and abolitionist Sojourner Truth. She was making the point that different abilities, like how smart you are, shouldn't determine your basic rights. Just because your cup holds a quart of intellect doesn't mean you can ignore someone else's pint. And that, right there, leads to the absolute core question of the entire book. If things like intelligence or reason or the ability to speak aren't the real basis for moral worth, then what is? Where do we draw that line? For Singer, the answer is actually really simple. It's sentience. The only boundary that makes any logical sense, he argues, is the capacity to suffer or to feel joy. If a being can heal pain, then that pain matters, and it deserves to be considered equally no matter what species that being belongs to. Now, Singer doesn't let this just stay as some abstract philosophical idea. He takes this principle and applies it to what he sees as the biggest system of animal exploitation on the planet, modern industrial agriculture. And the scale here, it's just staggering. It's almost impossible to really wrap your head around. Just in the US, we're talking over 5 billion chickens raised and killed for food. Every single year. It's an industry that operates on a scale that just dwarfs everything else.
And for most laying hens, this is their reality. They spend their entire lives crammed into wire cages, so tight they can't even stretch their wings. Every single natural instinct they have is just frustrated. And the male chicks? Well, they're useless to the egg industry, so they're killed by the millions, often on the very day they hatch.
The system for veal production is just as methodical. Calves are separated from their mothers, locked in crates so narrow they literally cannot turn around, and then they're fed a liquid diet that's deliberately deficient in iron. And why? To make them anemic, which keeps their meat pale and tender for the consumer. Singer argues that this exact same logic, this speciesism, is what props up the use of millions of animals in scientific labs. It's this underlying assumption that their suffering is an acceptable price to pay for potential human benefit. Now, getting precise numbers is notoriously difficult, but a conservative estimate from a U.S. government office suggests at least 17 to 22 million animals are used in labs every year. And that number doesn't even count rats, mice, or birds, which make up the vast majority. Singer highlights these standard, almost routine procedures, like the LD50 test. The name stands for lethal dose 50%. You take a group of animals, you force feed them a substance, could be a cosmetic, a chemical, anything, until half of them are dead. By its very design, it is a test of how to cause maximum suffering. He also pulls back the curtain on military experiments, like this one. Here, monkeys are put through weeks of training that involves thousands of electric shocks just to get them ready for the actual experiment. And in that part, they're irradiated or drugged and forced to do the task over and over again until they just collapse. And in the world of psychology, he points to Harry Harlow's infamous maternal deprivation studies. This quote is from Harlow himself. He built a device, a monster mother, that would blast infant monkeys with compressed air. He says the experiment failed to make them mentally ill, because the terrified babies just clung even tighter to the source of their pain. Okay, so after laying out this incredibly grim picture of suffering in farms and labs, what's the solution? I mean, what does Singer suggest an ordinary person can even do in the face of such a massive system?
Well, his answer isn't some complex political plan. It's a really direct, practical, and personal step: becoming a vegetarian. He frames it as a boycott. And he argues this is way more than just a symbolic gesture. It's a legitimate economic strategy. Every single time you choose not to buy meat, you are directly refusing to fund these industries. You are chipping away at the demand that is the only reason these animals are bred into a life of suffering in the first place.
And this goes beyond just ethics. It's also about mind-boggling inefficiency. Singer points out the incredible waste in modern animal agriculture. I mean, get this. It takes 33 calories of fossil fuel energy just to produce a single calorie of feed-lot beef. On the flip side, growing something like oats actually creates an energy surplus. So, you have to remember, animal liberation came out way back in 1975. It basically ignited the modern animal rights movement. So the big question is, after all these decades, did it actually make a difference? And the answer is a pretty clear yes. I mean, just look at this timeline. In the years after the book was published, you see real, tangible change. Britain banned sow crates. California voters passed a law to ban battery cages, and then the entire European Union did the same. And huge companies and industries like cosmetics started moving away from animal testing. And as Singer himself wrote in a more recent preface, public attitudes have just completely shifted. The ideas that seemed so radical and out there back in 1975 have slowly but surely moved into the mainstream, and they've changed laws and corporate behavior along the way. But this brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? Back to that simple choice at a party with a ham sandwich. Singer's work ultimately turns the spotlight back on us and forces us to ask, when we make our own everyday choices, what do they really say about where we draw the line and who we decide to include inside our circle of moral concern?